Hi everyone. I hope you're well. It's me again. I'm down in my basement. I'm gonna talk to y'all for a minute today. I hope everybody's doing okay, staying safe. Man alive. Been pretty crazy, but we're doing okay over here in my house. So far so good, people. A few things for y'all today that I want to talk about. One, in a minute, we're going to talk about Lindsay's poems, her presentation poems. We're going to do that in just a second. It turns out that one of the poems that Lindsay chose was one of the poems that Chris had chosen. So I'm not going to cover that poem, but we will look at the other one. That means we have a little bit of extra time than we normally have because instead of looking at two poems, we just have the one to look at, which is fine, Lindsay. You don't have to worry about that. That's all totally cool. But so what I want to do is use a little bit of this extra time quickly to talk about publishing. I know a couple of people have talked to me previously about wanting to learn more about publishing, about how it is that you go about that. So I'm just going to talk about that for just a second, and then we'll move on to Lindsay's poems. So, people, I know a number of you want to, at some point in time in your life, publish a book, be involved in publishing something, doing something along those lines. So, I'm not really going to talk about fiction and creative nonfiction and how you get those things published because it's a little different than poetry. Obviously, creative nonfiction and fiction both can make lots of money, and therefore agents are involved and issues that are not involved when it comes to publishing poetry, which makes no money and thus operates by sort of slightly different rules. Here's what you want to do if you want to publish a book at one point in time. If you want to publish a book of poems at one point in time, you need to first be publishing individual poems in journals before you get that book together. Um, very few people get a book of poems published without previously publishing the poems in that book. Maybe not all of the poems, but many of the poems. If you want to publish a book, the first thing to do is start publishing individual poems. Sometimes people publish individual poems for years before they get together a book. So keep that in mind. Oh my God, it might take a bit. Um, So, let's talk for a second here about how it is that you go about publishing individual poems. Okay, obviously, you write your poem, you do the best you can, you get it in as good a shape as you can get it in. You've checked it, you've made sure it doesn't have little tiny errors in it, you got all the commas, you got everything just where you want it to be, and you got it perfect. And now you're ready to send it off somewhere, but you don't know where to send it. Um, there are literally hundreds and thousands of journals, online journals, print journals. Obviously, these days, most journals have gone to being online, which just means there's many more of them to choose from. So, a question is, you only have X number of poems. Where do you send those poems to? What journals of the thousands of journals that are out there, where do you send them to? Well, your first instinct might be to, well, I'm going to send them to the biggest places like the New Yorker or the Atlantic or a Poetry Magazine or something that's a really big place because obviously that would be the coolest place to get published in. But if you have not previously published before, your odds of getting in at Poetry or getting in at the New Yorker or getting in at these really big journals is pretty slim. It can happen, of course, you're free to give it a shot, but I'm just saying it doesn't happen all that much. Usually, the people who are in the New Yorker, who are in those big journals, have already established their reputation to some degree or another publishing elsewhere. Not all the time, but so again, you're free to do it, but it's probably going to be really hard for you. So the first thought would be, oh, I'm going to publish in the biggest journals. But once you realize, well, that's not necessarily possible. So what journals do you choose from? Well, okay, this is the way I would go about it. You find a poet that you like. One poet you might like is Peter Davis and his book of poems, Tina. Okay, so you find a poet that you like and you read their book and you're like, I like this. This is good stuff. This is maybe the kind of thing that I'm doing, or maybe the kind of thing that I would like to do. I enjoy this book of poems. Okay, you find a book of poems that you enjoy. You look in the book, and someplace in the book, there's going to be an acknowledgments page, which is going to tell you all of the places that individual poems have been published before they were in this book. So in the back of my book, as you can see, there's an acknowledgments page. Um, and it has thanks to the editors of the following journals: Atticus Review, The Bakery, Country Music, Court Green, Everyday Genius, The Good Men Project, Interrupture, Lamination Colony, Meopoesis, Spooky Boyfriend, and Stoked. Those are all different journals that poems were published in. So you find a poet that you like, you find out where they've been publishing their poems, and those would be the first places you want to go look. So if you like my poems, you look at this and you say, you know what, I'm going to check out the journal Court Green, because Pete published in Court Green, and I like Pete's poems, and maybe Court Green will like the kind of poems that I'm doing. So then you go and you look at Court Green's website, and you look around and read some more of their poets, whatever they have up online. Make sure that it's a place that seems like it's your kind of deal. Because again, there's thousands of these journals. There's some journals that only publish rhymed poetry. There's some poets or some journals that only publish Christian poetry. There's some journals that publish feminist poetry. My point is that there are tons of different kinds of journals, so you want to be specific about where you're sending to. So you would look up Court Green, you would find Court Green, you would find that they've published me, you would find that they've published other authors. Well, maybe some of those other authors, you think, well, maybe I would like them. So you check into their work, it turns out you like their work. Look at their acknowledgement page. Where have they published? Have they published in the same places that I've published in, or maybe some new places? In this way, you can find journals that are doing the kind of thing that you like. In those journals, when you look them up too, they're going to have their authors in the journal for that month, and each author is going to have a small bio with their name, and that bio is going to say something along the lines of Peter Davis lives in Muncie, Indiana. He's published poems in blah 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 blah. So when you go to those journals, you're going to find lots of authors and lots more journals that they're referring to. You see how this works? So now you're on Court Green's journal. Now you've learned about an author who you didn't know. Now you've seen from their biography about journals that you didn't know about before, places for you to go look and find stuff that you like. Once you find a journal that you think is going to do the kind of thing that you like, then it is time to find their submission guidelines. You find the guidelines. They're going to say, hey, we only look at work in August, or hey, we want 5 to 10 poems. Hey, we want this. Hey, we want that. You're going to do whatever they say. If they only take sonnets, then you're only going to send them sonnets. If you mess with their guidelines, it's going to piss them off, because they got enough stuff to worry about without worrying about people who aren't even following their guidelines. And they want you to follow the guidelines, not just because they need those guidelines, but that also shows that you're paying attention to their journal, you're paying attention to them. They like that. When you submit poems to that journal, once you found out what their submission requirements are, and you are ready to go, and you've got your 4 poems ready, let's say, to send them, what you're going to want to do at that point is you are going to probably deal with a place called Submittable that is now something that almost all journals work through, that allow you to keep track of your submissions in a relatively easy way. You can deal with all this stuff. You will figure this out. But at any rate, once you found those journals, you find out their guidelines, you're going to follow their guidelines. They're going to ask you a couple of things, maybe. They might ask for a brief bio. You might not know what to put in your bio. Just be truthful. If you're just graduating from college, just say, I recently graduated from college. If you have any awards or achievements, like I won such and such scholarship, you can put that down. The more places, the more times you do this, you're going to have more and more stuff to put in that bio eventually. So the bio is just going to be a really quick thing that says, "Hey, Peter Davis does this. Um, his books have been published here, here, and here, and he lives in Muncie." Okay, two or three, four sentences at the most of a bio of what you got going on. You're going to follow all their guidelines, and you're going to submit. Um, Okay, one thing. Sometimes people in their guidelines say that they don't want simultaneous submissions. What this means is that they don't want you sending the poem that you're sending them to other places at the same time that you have it with them, because they don't want to pick your poem and then find out that some other places picked it up and created some problems for them. So some places just want you to send just to them. Follow what they say. Having said that, I've simultaneously submitted poems a number of times when I wasn't supposed to, because simply it takes sometimes months and months for people to get back to you. Very frequently, are you even accepted? The odds that the same place is going to accept the same poem at around the same time have been relatively slim, though it could happen. And if it does happen that a poem, I'd say I submit two poems to two different journals that don't take simultaneous submissions, and one of them picks it up, I'm like, yay, that's great. But then I got to get in touch with the other one and tell them, I am so sorry. I accidentally mailed that poem to such and such, and they took it. I apologize so much for doing this. My bad, my bad. Right? So that's how I would handle that. Um, Again, simultaneous submissions is a tricky thing, but you don't have your whole life to wait around. And as long as you're good about getting to people, back to people when you find out a poem has been picked up or something, you're probably in pretty decent shape. Um, Okay. Another thing that I want to point out is that when you submit poems, the odds of getting accepted are very slim. You are going to get rejected a whole bunch. I don't even know what the percentages are, but they are bad, people. I say this to you to not get discouraged, because it's very likely that you might submit 100 poems before you get one or two or three published. I mean, and the more you do it, you'll get better and better, and those percentages will get better and better. But they're still pretty bad percentages. I mean, if I send out a poem, it's still not 50% that I might get it or I might not. I don't know. The odds are much smaller than that. And so the point is you're going to face a lot of rejection. Try not to get too bummed out by it. Of course, nobody likes to be rejected. It's going to make you feel a little bad. But remember that if one journal doesn't like your poem, that doesn't say much about your poem. That says something about their journal, what they're looking for and what they want. It does not mean that your poem is garbage. It does not mean that other people won't enjoy your poem. On the other hand, if it gets rejected a ton of times, maybe you need to think, well, do I need to revise this thing? Or maybe this poem's not as good as I thought it was. Right? So there are different ways of thinking about that. All right. One final thing that I want to mention about publication, which is the Broken Plate here at Ball State. Many of you are familiar with the Broken Plate. If you're not, it's Ball State's literary journal. Um, it is a nationally recognized journal. They take submissions from people all over the nation, not just people from Ball State, but they do give a little preference to Ball State students. So if you are interested in publishing, the Broken Plate would be probably the very first place you might want to check and start. Because again, they're going to give you a little bit more attention simply because you're from Ball State. Okay, Broken Plate. Look into that. If you have questions about this stuff, you let me know, and I'll be happy to try to answer it. So now let's talk about Lindsey's poems. She picked two poems from Eleanor Wiley, and one of those poems was Sea Lullaby, which again was one of the poems that Chris chose. And so we've already talked about that. Let's look at the other one that on page 312 called Let No Charitable Hope. This is on 312, right? Eleanor Wiley. And let's see, first of all, what Lindsey's got to say about it. She says, I chose this because it seems to be a critique of the way that women had to live during her time period, right? And she's in the, dies in 1928. She mentions women had to live during that time period. She mentions living by squeezing what little nourishment she can get from a stone, meaning to me that women always get the bare minimum and the lowest quality. The beginning speaks of wanting no hope of the image of other animals flying and being free, speaking of the confinement that comes with being a woman in the 20th century, in the 20s. Oh yeah, right. Right. At the end, she speaks of masks that are worn year after year, as if she isn't allowed to always show her true self because she has a specific way that how she is supposed to act. However, I can't tell if the ending of this poem is positive or negative. I'm with you. She said that each year gave her no fear and never escaped her smile. Is she happy with the way her life is, even with her critique of the way things are? I don't know. So those are good questions, Lindsay. I do think one of the things you mentioned here, um, yeah, right. The idea, I really like this idea that you say the beginning, let no charitable hope confuse my mind with images of eagles and antelopes. So even in your most charitable thinking, don't confuse me with an eagle or an antelope. I am neither one of those things. And as Lindsay points out here, being free, she is not free. She is confined. Oh, well, let me just read this. Let no charitable hope. Now, let no charitable hope confuse my mind with images of eagle and of antelope. I am in nature none of these. I was, being human, born alone. I am, being woman, hard beset. I live by squeezing from a stone the little nourishment I can get. Enmasked, outrageous, and austere, the years go by in single file, but none has merited my fear, and none has quite escaped my smile. Okay, so interesting poem here. Obviously rhymes. We've got a rhyme pattern throughout the poem. Um, Short, relatively simple. And again, that first stanza, right? Don't confuse me with these beautiful animals out there that are free. I am a human, and that means I was born alone. And I'm a woman, which means I'm hard beset, which means even for people who are born, I've got a hard road. I live by squeezing from a stone the little nourishment I can get. And I think Lindsay's right here, right? Um, what nourishment can women get in society? They have to squeeze it from a stone, is one way of looking at it. Um, and mask outrageous and austere. So, and masks that are crazy, and some that are austere, like serious and maybe formal. I don't know. The years go by in single file. So the years come in masks. Some of them are outrageous. Some of them are austere. Maybe, or maybe those are the masks that she wears as the years go by. But none has merited my fear, and none has quite escaped my smile. And when she says none, I don't know here whether she's referring to the years or to the mask. Has none of her mask made her actually scared, and has none of them? I'm sorry, and none has quite escaped me. So the mask, none of them have actually scared her. All of them have been worth smiling at. Or is that the years? Each year, none of them has been that scary. But they've all been something to smile at. I'm not exactly sure. A relatively complicated poem for being so simple. Really interesting. Sounds good. I like it. I really like the rhyme of women hard beset. I live by squeezing from a stone the little nourishment I can get. Oh, and just notice in that line too that there's not a comma after stone, though there is a semicolon after alone and beset, which means, you know, those first two lines we stop at the end. I was being human, born alone. I am being woman, hard beset. I live by squeezing from a stone the little nourishment I can get. And because there's not a comma after that stone, the rhythm changes. It's a lot more fun. So, all right, people. We've got a couple more minutes here that we are going to write a poem. Here's what we're going to do today. I want you to write a rhyming poem. We are going to try to do just as she did in that poem, an A B format, right? C D E F EF. This is what she did, and we're gonna write a poem like that, right? So your first and third lines, and your second and your fourth lines are gonna rhyme, in each stanza. And I'm gonna try to do 3 stanzas here, about anything that you want. People, are you ready to do this? Let's see what we can come up with. I guess my first thought when I'm thinking about, well, what am I going to write about? I guess I'm thinking about humans and what we're all born into, just like Eleanor Wiley is born into being a woman and what that means. So, are y'all ready to write a poem? I'm ready to write a poem. Here we go. On your mark, get set, go. Okay, people, I wrote my poem. I don't know about you. Take a couple more minutes if you need to. I'll read you what I wrote. I wrote a rhyming poem, A B C D C D E F E F. I'm gonna do my best Eleanor Wiley interpretation. Here's mine. Ready? I'm a human, you bet. I'm a lover of life. I'm sort of lonely yet. I've got kids and a wife. When I was small, I was scared of the dark. I'm older now, and all I'm scared of is in my heart. So I try to change and stay the same, and yet living is so strange. I cannot tell the joy. Yeah, that's bad. That's not bad. I don't like that at all. Give me just a second. And so I try to change and stay the same, and yet living is so strange. Living is so strange. This is much better, people. Okay, so I'm gonna start from the beginning again. This will be better. Ready? I'm a human, you bet, and I'm a lover of life. I'm sort of lonely yet. I've got kids and a wife. When I was small, I was scared of the dark. I'm older now, and all I'm scared of is my heart. And so I try to change and stay the same, and yet living is so strange that joy is sometimes pain. Whoa, that's better. It's still pretty weak, people, but we do the best we can when we only got a couple of minutes to write a poem. I hope everybody's great. Thank you, Lindsay, for your poems. Y'all let me know if you've got questions about anything, questions about publishing, questions, publishing, whatever, questions about anything in regards to the class, questions about life in general. That's all fine. You can put stuff in the comment box of the video. You can send me an email. I hope everyone's well, and I'll be in touch soon. Bye bye.